Hi, it's Isabel, A Curious Tale. This week I'd like to take a little deviation from tarot and oracle and share two upcycling projects. The first one I'll just briefly go through, it's a smaller one, and then the second one is a lot more in-depth. I really love upcycling clothing. Nowadays I think everyone knows why pursuing sustainable zero waste fashion is just so much better in so many ways, but really I just find it so fun, a way to have absolutely unique clothing, make sure that items don't go to waste, and as someone who is a massive collector, I just love holding on to buttons, braids, fabrics as a way to have memories of where I've been and people in my life who've given them to me. It's just a great way of putting those to use in a way that's actually practical. And yeah, I just see textile art, upcycle clothing as wearable art, and I think it's so fun. So I wanted to share some projects with you, just to maybe inspire you to try these out yourself, or over the years I've sold upcycled clothing and reworked vintage, sort of in different ways under different brands. So I'm also thinking of bringing that back. So this is kind of also like a little sneak peek of what that would maybe look like. But yeah, let me know if you upcycle clothing, how and why, your tips, and also let me know what you think about my projects. These are all hand sewn because where I'm right now I don't have a sewing machine, but honestly I just really love the process of hand sewing. I find it very relaxing and meditative, and you can also sort of sit on the sofa and hand sew. It can be a lot more informal, just having projects that you can pick up and work on, and I think it's a great way to de-stress, which is quite apt right now, and I think you can either approach it as an aesthetic project, or you can approach it in a more sort of magical way, embroider sigils into your clothing. You can use items that have significance for you, and yeah, just create items of clothing that are not only fun and unique to wear, but are very meaningful to you as well, and that's why as well I'd suggest that if it's possible, collecting little buttons and trims from presents and textiles from clothes that might not fit or might be stained over the years, if you have a place to store them, that's always going to be so much more meaningful than sort of buying pre-done kits, or same with trinkets. Collecting antique brooches from charity shops over the years is always going to give you a unique piece that really means something to you, as opposed to just going and buying a sort of preset selection, although of course there's a time and a place for that too. But yeah, let me know what you think of my projects and let's see them. This was a dress, and the jersey of the sleeves had sort of stretched and gone strangely saggy. So I basically just cut them off, keeping the edges rugged because I thought it sort of suited the spirit of the dress. And then here I'm just chopping off the cuffs to later customize. And this is a vintage per una tweed blazer, and I really wanted to take the approach of sort of battle jackets you see with metal band patches and everything on it, but obviously in a very different aesthetic. So I basically, just as you saw, assembled some trinkets, some braid, and lots of different things that I thought might work, but I didn't have any kind of plan. I just took out from my stash everything I thought fit the colour palette and really just had to play around. I like to just see what happens. So as you'll see when we get to the finished product, it definitely didn't use a lot of the materials that I'd taken out, but
I think I really like how it turned out. Let's see when you get to see it. So this is the first piece I'm just preparing. This is actually the front piece of a kurta that my mother-in-law gave to me. She didn't need the kurta anymore, and she kept this piece because it has some really lovely embroidery on it and some sparkle as well. I think, kurtas are amazing for getting applique pieces from, because a lot of them have really beautiful, often floral designs and just decorative bits on it. So I decided to iron it. I'm not a big ironer, as you can probably tell by my technique, but I'm just ironing it because it's cotton, and the sort of smoother it is, the easier it's going to be to cut and to sew. So this is one of the times I think it's actually worth it to iron, because it's just going to make the process a lot easier. And yeah, I don't have an ironing board, so I'm just using a cushion, which actually works pretty well. So yeah, I basically chose this piece because I thought the colours would go really well. It would be quite a juxtaposition, and then also because I have, lovely memories because my mother-in-law gave it to me. And this is another piece I really wanted to add to the jacket. I've had this for about 9 years. I got it at a tattoo convention in Nepal. I believe a French or Belgian tattoo artist, she was selling it. It's a patch made from a print that was hand done, and it's just one of those things that I'd been in my stash for ages because I think it's beautiful, but I'd never really found quite the right piece to put it on. So I finally felt like this would be the moment, and it's going to be a back patch on my jacket. Like, as I said, you'll see people often in like the metal scene, sometimes punk and goth scene, put band patches on jackets and create these beautiful pieces. So I'm taking that approach, but instead of using a band patch, this is an art patch. So I'm just playing around here with the jacket, laying it out and just sort of experimenting with how things might look. I don't like to plan these things. I really like to just make up as I go along, because I think then you can just like let it organically happen, and at least for me, that's when I think the result turns out the best, because you just sort of, like here, I'm just trimming the top bit of the patch because I realise there's a lot of extra space at the top that I don't need, and it doesn't really work, with the shape. And then later on, I take that piece of fabric that I trim off the top and I add it as part of my design for the front, and then that ends up bringing the front and the back together, which is really nice. But it also just means, there's no waste, and I probably wouldn't have thought, to put an extra patch on the front, but then it just sort of organically happened. So that's why I really love just treating it like you're playing around and just seeing what happened. And the same thing happens here. I'm looking at this beautiful applique piece on the front of the kurta, and I start cutting it out and just start to think, do I want to use this as one big piece, realising that if I do that, it won't really fit on the jacket along with what I'm going to use as the back patch, the purple print that I have. So I actually end up cutting it into multiple smaller pieces, which you'll see later. But I didn't necessarily have that plan from the beginning, and when I was sort of deciding how to break it up into different small pieces, I just sort of experimented and let it happen, because I think upcycling is just so fun, and it's nice to approach it from that place of play, of experimenting, and just having fun. I feel like that sort of translates into the garment, and you can tell, I think you can tell if that's how it's been made, and I think it just makes it even more magical. And speaking of magic, I think being able to wear garments that have fabrics and trims from different countries that you might have lived in or visited, and that loved ones have given you, I think it just makes them so much more meaningful, and it's like translating your experiences into a garment. So that's why I just really love, this whole process. And obviously here, I was filming myself doing it, but normally I like to either put some music on or listen to a more chatty YouTube video that I don't necessarily have to watch the screen, and just listen, sort of like a podcast, and just really get into that creative zone. I think a lot of people describe it as a flow state where you're just in the moment, enjoying yourself, being creative, and it does feel like things just flow. It's almost like you tap into something else, beyond beyond just yourself, almost like a more general creative archetype. I don't know if everyone else has that experience, but I think a lot of people have sort of described it like that, so I'm sure it's not just me. And here you can see I'm just laying the patch out on the back of the jacket and just imagining how could I place these pieces around the patch which I want to be the centerpiece. And I just start cutting, and again, see what happens. I wanted to use the bottom piece. I was sort of inspired by the classic tramp stamp tattoos, to take off the bottom flowers and place that at the bottom. And I'm just sort of covering as much of the border of the patch as possible with the appliques, because I think that will give it just a border effect, and I think that would be really lovely. And I already like to see how all these colours are coming together. I think the blues and the purples, the lighting here is a little dull, so I feel like it doesn't quite show on camera. But I think that the colours, there are lots of blues, lots of purples, they are reflected in the jacket. It's just with the lighting here, I think the jacket comes across slightly duller, but I can show you that in real life it's more vibrant. And it's fun because this is a early 2000s jacket, a sort of vibrant tweed with some sort of raw edges, and I chose this for the project because I thought the raw edges on the jacket that you can see on the elbow patches, around the pockets on the front and the collar, they already have that slight DIY feel. So I think adding all these patches to it, it's not going to look out of place because there's already elements on the jacket itself that have that sort of feel. But saying that, I think it would really work on any kind of jacket, and you can always just you could always just dress elements, or you could also approach the appliques in a more streamlined way. As you'll see when I sew, I'm leaving my edges raw, because I think that fits with, as I said, the raw edges in the jacket and just a sort of organic feeling that I want it to have. But you could also take your appliques and iron them onto interfacing to give them a bit of structure, and then you could always very finely blanket stitch around the edges, or you could create a very, very fine seam all the way around it. It's just that would take a lot longer. Or if you were using a machine, you could do a zigzag stitch around all of it, sort of catch the ends. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach it, and then depending on how raw or how polished you want the final product to look, and that just depends on your personal taste, as well as how much sort of time and effort you're willing to put into the project. I think for me, one benefit of doing things perhaps more organically is that you can do it in a more relaxed way as well. It's less of a technical exercise and it's more of a creative exercise. Not that things that are technical aren't also creative, but it's just that what's driving you can be more relaxed about doing it, and just see what happens. And then anything that could be described as a mistake, it's just part of the process. That's what I really like. So I'm just sort of roughly cutting around these paisley designs. I think this is pretty common knowledge, but just interesting because I'm in Scotland, that this shape, which is often called the paisley, is actually named after the, is it a town or city? I don't know, Paisley, but it's near Glasgow, right? In Scotland. And I believe that's because a lot of fabric with that print was manufactured there. However, obviously the paisley design is a traditional design from South Asia. So it's funny that we say the word paisley, and I will admit that as a child I didn't know that Paisley was the name of a place. I just thought it was the name of that shape, but yeah, it's the name of a place in Scotland, and it's probably the wrong name for it because, yeah, that was obviously not where it originated from. That was just where it was later being manufactured and traded. So that's a random South Asian and Scottish bit of textile history. So yeah, as you can see, it's not a quick process, and for me, when it comes to upcycling, I love that it's, you know, a slower process, because I think it sort of it encourages you to slow down, and then because you're doing things slowly, you're not rushing, it also gives you the mental space to just ponder things while you're doing it. So some of this time I'll be thinking, how am I going to execute this? But then other times my mind is just going to wander, and I think that's really lovely, just having that time to just think about things, do things slowly and not rush. I think it's very healthy and not something that is promoted so much nowadays. It's a lot about, rushing, doing things in the most effective and efficient way possible, and I think there's, something to be said for doing things not in the most efficient or streamlined way possible, but just the way that naturally occurs to you. I think that's also fine, and I enjoy just whenever I have time to do things in my own way, even if it's, not the best way. I'm sure there's a lot of professionals that could come up with many ways to improve how I'm doing this, but for me, although I want a garment that's wearable, that's sturdy, that's not the only point to this exercise. It's also just enjoying myself, being creative, playing around, and having time just for myself and my thoughts. So yeah, now here I put the patches where I want them, and I really like how that looks. So I just pop the excess to the side because I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to use it on the front to draw the front and the back together. And here's a long bit I cut out, which you can see I've put with the strip I cut off from the back piece, and I really like how that looks. So that's going to turn out on the front, and then this singular flower we have here, I'm also cutting that out, and that's going to go on the front as well. And I think that's one way, when you're doing quite an eclectic project, one way that you can sort of have some continuity and make it look intentional is by repeating elements. So if you use a little bit of trim in one area, if you then use it in another area as well, then it looks to me a lot more intentional. Of course, if you want to go for a total mismatched aesthetic, then that's different. But for me here, I want something that looks eclectic, it looks creative, and sort of juxtaposing different things, but I do want it to look thought out. So that's why I think, just mirroring elements it is good for that. And also just, again, wasting as little textile as possible. I always aim not to waste any because firstly, I'm a bit of a hoarder, and secondly, textile waste is just one of the great pollutants at the moment. Here I just took a picture because basically I'm going to need to take some of these off put them back on, and I don't want to forget where I've put them. So this is me just playing around on the front. I've got those pieces I cut off that I'm putting on the pockets, and just playing around with adding some of the brooches I had, the braids, how that might look. So the next day I sewed on the patch, again quite roughly as you can see, but I did a double stitch where I went back over myself just to make sure it's super secure, and that's also because I'm not hemming the edges, I'm just leaving them raw. So by sewing like this, it means that it's less likely to fray. I mean, this isn't on any part of the jacket that's going to be having a lot of movement, like perhaps the cuffs. It's just sort of going to be static when I wear it, so I think there's a lot less chance for fraying, but I still like to be, thorough, and then I'll just be confident that I can wear it many times and it's not going to fray, it's not going to need a lot of repairing. So here's how I'm sewing it on. I don't necessarily recommend my sewing technique because I do quite often stab myself in the thumb with the needle, but I just can't wear a thimble. I feel like it gets in the way, and again, it's not the most efficient way of doing it, but I find like this technique for me is easy when I'm sewing on appliques, because I can sort of manipulate the fabric as I go, just to make sure that there are no unnecessary creases, and that I'm going through the layers that I want to go through. And I've also doubled my threads because I find that just easier in terms of, when you start and stop each bit of thread, but also, it's double the strength, which is also good. And I've also I pinned the appliques on before I sewed them. You could also tack it on before you sew it, if you want to be really sort of, what would the word be, cautious, I suppose, just to make sure that the way you've put it on is correct before you sort of put all the time into sewing it by hand. And that's I've shown I believe on Instagram a jacket that I sewed an applique on, and I did actually tack it first. But for this, because it's cotton, it's quite easy to sew with, so I just didn't feel the need to tack. I just went right in and hand sewed it. And here's a little time lapse of me just finishing that off. As you can see, it's not the quickest process, but it's very fun. And I did decide to go through both layers, including the lining, just because, again, it doesn't need movement, so it's fine. Here is the front of the jacket, and cut to me having sewn everything on the front, everything on the back, and this is my finished piece. I love how it turned out. Please do let me know what you think.